The City of Johannesburg Council will today hold its first post-election council sitting. Political parties still in talks over possible coalitions in the city. This sitting will prove to be crucial following developments over the weekend between the Democratical Alliance, ActionSA, United Democratic Movement, ACDP and the Freedom Front Plus. Now, after announcing a coalition agreement on Friday, relations seem to be strained after the DA refused to allow Herman Mashaba to lead Johannesburg. Well, let's try and get reaction from the Democratic Alliance, or perhaps not even reaction, but the reasons for why the party decided to pull out of what was announced to be a deal on Friday. John Steenhuisen joining us now. John, a very good morning to you. So explain the decision by the Democratic Alliance, and the understanding is that this was after your FedEx meeting.
Well, let me just clarify first of all, and thank you for the opportunity. There was no deal on Friday, and anyone who's trying to portray that there was is being fundamentally dishonest. There was a proposal put on the table that parties were going to go back and discuss with their relevant executives and come back. So this notion that there was some deal that was agreed on Friday is simply not true and is not supported by the facts. We had discussed at the Federal Executive over the weekend the implications for what is essentially going to be a minority government, a very unstable minority government, reliant on the votes of the EFF to get anything done in the council.
Yeah.
So let's go back a step. The pathway towards an opposition-led coalition in the city of Johannesburg was greatly damaged by the departure of the IFP and the PA, because without them in part of the opposition coalition, the coalition numbers would add up to 134. That's way below the threshold that's required for the 50% plus one.
Yeah.
So the very best that could happen is a minority government that's going to be reliant for the next 5 years on the EFF to be the tail wagging the coalition dog. Now, I made a public commitment on your show and on various other shows before the election that the DA would not be part of ending up in a situation like that again, particularly given the fact that we've been in that movie before. It's essentially what happened after the 2016 election.
Yeah.
And that we would focus, and again I've been clear with you and others on the program, we're going to focus on stable coalitions that can deliver over the next period.
Yeah.
The very best that the opposition can do in Joburg is an unstable minority government relying on the EFF to make key decisions in the council, and we don't want to be part of that.
Well, let me ask you this, John, because your position is quite clear then. It has to do with the discomfort around the EFF basically being the tail that wags the dog here, as you've explained it. My question has to do with whether or not you do not trust Herman Mashaba to be his own man if and when this coalition, and should you change your mind, I don't know whether you are going to, but why don't you trust that Herman Mashaba could be his own person here? I know about the previous discomfort that you've expressed, that he almost became an EFF representative in your meetings. I think this was how one newspaper described it in its article over the weekend. But surely Herman Mashaba can be his own man, can he not?
Cody, thank you very much. And what I'm not going to do is get into a slagging match between opposition leaders. I think it's been distinctly unhelpful seeing leaders slagging off other parties on public platforms while negotiations were underway. So I'm not going to get into a tit-for-tat match about who's a better person and who's not. I will just say that experience showed us in the time that we were in government in Joburg that we were forced into adopting certain policies that were the antithesis of what the DA stands for. And those happened under the previous mayor's watch, and they happened because the EFF was the tail wagging the coalition dog behind the scenes. And Mr. Malema has been on the media and on your channel explaining very, very carefully how that worked and how the EFF were pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I don't want the DA to be involved in any coalition where the economic freedom fighters are the determining factor about whether budgets pass, whether appointments are made, how budgets are spent, how town planning decisions are made, because our experience, and we are a learning organization, our experience has shown us that this is not a stable way to run a government. And I think that I was very clear going into the election that we would not be part of any voting bloc or arrangement that involved the EFF, and I intend to perhaps buck the trend in South African politics, but stand by my word.
John, I've got to ask this question to you, and I know your position around wanting to deal with or not wanting to deal with personalities here, but has the Democratic Alliance allowed Helen Zille's relations with Herman Mashaba to get in the way of serving citizens?
Well, I can say absolutely not. And we've had a multiple member team that has been negotiating around the country. This is not about personalities. It's about principles. And the principle here is very, very clear to us. We want stable governments that are going to be able to deliver over the next 5 years. And that is absolutely important because we need to demonstrate after 5 years of chaotic coalition arrangements that this can be a successful form of government that delivers, particularly as we approach 2024 in an environment where the ANC is below 50%.
Yeah.
I don't think that South Africa is going to be served by unstable coalitions that undermine further confidence in that, particularly given the prospects in 2024. But I can give you the assurance this is nothing about personalities, and that's why all of the coalition agreements and proposals that we placed on the table did not mention people's names, they did not mention personalities. They were based on principles, objectives, and a common program of action. And that's what's guided our coalition negotiations, and we are the only opposition party that successfully concluded a large variety of coalitions across the length and breadth of South Africa, and are still in the process of doing so.
Yeah.
We do so from a basis of principle, objective, and purpose, not personalities.
And so I take it then, John, that with this decision, you're also happy to let go or relinquish your control of the city of Tshwane, because that's at least what the Freedom Front Plus, which is a key ally of yours in that city, has basically suggested.
Well, that's certainly not what they've suggested in the meetings that I've had with them. And I think that it has been a mistake to couple Joburg and Tshwane at the tote. And I'll tell you why. It's like comparing apples with oranges. In Tshwane, there is a clear path for an opposition majority where 3 parties, perhaps 4, can form a 50% plus 1 majority government. That is a very, very different situation to Joburg, where when the Patriotic Alliance and the IFP walked away from the opposition bloc and went over to the ANC, they narrowed that pathway to victory. Well, they basically decimated that pathway to victory, because there's no way you can get a 50% plus 1 majority in Joburg now to form a stable opposition-led coalition. That's not the case in Tshwane, and I really do hope that maturity and level heads would be able to see very clearly the difference between the two and why we can really form a bloc that's not reliant on either the ANC or the EFF in Tshwane to form a stable coalition government. But coupling Joburg and Tshwane, 2 completely different cities with completely different challenges and completely different environments at the tote, I think has been a mistake, and I think it's a rabbit hole that a lot of people have been led down, but one that's not actually borne out by the factual situation when you look at the numbers.
Yeah.
We can and must try and form an opposition coalition in Tshwane, and we're working very, very hard to make sure that that happens.
Political observers, John, are of the strong opinion that this is going to get you seriously punished come the next election, because what you have effectively done, or what you are doing, is that you are in a way allowing the ANC to come back and take control of these cities when they have actually dismally failed the people of South Africa.
Well, Lodi, I would say that they're not analyzing very well if that is the case, because the numbers are not there. The voters gave us the numbers that we have to work with. The Patriotic Alliance and the IFP used those numbers to go over to another bloc, a voting bloc, and have denied the opposition that. I can't go back and rewrite the election result. But what I can do is make sure that my party remains principled to the promises that we made going into this election. And I was very clear that we would not be involved in any coalition government where it was reliant on the economic freedom fighters to be able to determine the way forward and whether the government can sustain itself or not. Yeah. And I intend to keep those promises. And I think it would be even worse for a politician, and particularly a leader of a party, to make pre-election promises and then walk away from them for expediency's sake or to make a few political analysts happy. That's not how we're going to build a principled, value-led opposition and alternative to the ANC in South Africa. And I think people need to know that when a party makes commitments going into an election, that it stands by those commitments. We didn't hand Joburg back to the ANC. The voters and the way they voted have spoken. Parties have made decisions, the PA and the IFP, to go in with the ANC, and that has essentially closed the door on an opposition-led majority government there. We simply don't have the numbers. 136 is the threshold. The very best that any opposition coalition can muster is probably around about 134, and that is way short of the 50% plus one threshold. It's not about personalities, it's about the numbers. The numbers cannot be changed. They're not going to change today. They're not going to change in 7 days' time. They're not going to change in 14 days' time. But what I will not do is walk back on pre-election promises. It has disastrous consequences for leaders around the world. You saw what happened with Nick Clegg in the Great Britain when he walked back on the tuition fees undertaking that he'd made just to form a coalition with the Conservative Party. I want people to know that when they trust the DA, we're going to carry out our word and hold true to that word throughout the term of our office.
Two quick questions as I let you go. I take it, therefore, that on the back of your explanation of the numbers threshold in Johannesburg, which sitting is going to take place today, you're not going to be fielding your own candidate for mayor. But coupled with that, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, just outright, what is this allergic reaction to the EFF?
Thanks, Molly. First of all, we will be fielding a candidate. We are the second largest party in Johannesburg, and that was not of our own choice, it was the voters' choice. They've made us the second biggest party. Our 71 seats is bigger than all of those other opposition parties combined. So we will be fielding Dr. Mpopalatsi as a mayoral candidate today because it's our duty as the official opposition to offer an alternative there. And who knows what might happen. There may be a withering away of the ANC bloc in Joburg. Who knows what may happen. But we will be in the meeting, we will field our candidate, and we will vote for her as we committed to doing in the election. Secondly, the EFF are the antithesis of what we believe open opportunity society for all should embody. Their race-based policies, their policies on nationalization and on the economy are the antithesis of what we believe in. And we believe that the solution in South Africa lies in building a rational center to form a bulwark against precisely those policies and programs of the EFF that will ultimately lead to misery, starvation, and suffering, as they have in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and everywhere else that they've been tried. We believe that it is our duty to prevent that from happening. We also know that the EFF are rent seekers, and they would use any opportunity when they were the tail wagging the coalition dog to get their hands on tenders and contracts, appointments of municipal officials, to carry on the work that we've seen them doing with VBS, with the fleet tender contract, with various other programs in other municipalities. And we're not prepared to allow the EFF to sneak in through the back door under the guise of some minority opposition government to be able to carry on with the project that they started after 2016.
John Steenhuisen is the leader of the Democratic Alliance. Thank you very much for your time.